Brilliant. And we've seen accelerated, welcome Jade, it's good to see you here. We've seen accelerated adoption of digital technologies in our homes. Are you anticipating that will catalyze digital technology growth across the built environment? Say to yourself, Jade, thank you for joining us. Have you seen an increase in digital technologies being applied both across your work in construction, but also the wider energy sector?
Probably not as much as we should have done. I think the whole sector is very slow to change and adapt innovation, hence the work I've been doing over the last 4 years with the Construction Leadership Council. The technologies have been there quite a while. The sector doesn't adopt them anywhere near as quickly as it should. And I think there's kind of little, need to change specifically in the house building sector. So not as much as we should have done, but you can certainly see that the tools themselves have improved to the point where we should be using them a lot more. As I mentioned in my presentation, we need things like building passports that will allow a more holistic approach to retrofitting buildings and dealing with things like zero carbon. I think all the technologies exist there, but the schemes and the government policies restrict us to the old technologies, which don't quite do the job. So we tend to be held back by kind of mass-used old technologies, for example, SAP and the EPC process, which we know there's better systems out there, but because they're mass-used and they're already integrated, we get held back to those old technologies. So I think, technology is hugely moved on and is changing at a rate of knots, but our adaptation of it isn't.
And Jill, clearly there's been multiple impacts affecting the construction sector. Can I start by asking you how the pandemic has generally affected your work and that of the CIH?
Personally, obviously it's affected me because I'm working from home. But in terms of CIH, what it's actually done is it's helped us to accelerate the programme, and given us that bigger push to move the sector on. It's allowed us actually to be more agile and work, obviously with Construction Leadership Council as part of their reset recovery programme as well. So clearly, you can't describe the effect it's had on the world. And
yeah, of course.
But hopefully the hub now is in a position to support industry. It's not business as usual anymore. We've just got to get on with it. So that's what the hub's trying to do and working with everybody in that process.
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, and Stephen, clearly this whole summit is around the digital future. We've moved a lot of the MBS platforms to the cloud. Do you think that means we have the technology to now deliver a golden thread of information in full?
Yeah, so I think what we've seen over the last 6 or 7 months is obviously it would be nice to meet everybody face to face today and have a conference and have chocolate biscuits and a cup of coffee and done that networking. So I wouldn't say that everything's perfect about doing everything in the cloud and online and things, but clearly it does have advantages. And I think just things like it's the single source of information. So if you're developing a specification and you're using Microsoft Word files scattered around a local network, watch the latest version. If you can all come wherever you're working, whether you're at home, whether you're in the office, whether you're on holiday and you've got to finish something off, just popping a web browser up and going straight in there, it's a big step forward. The ability to collaborate and things like speed and improvements. Whereas if you're working off a sort of wide area network onto an old file system, there's 2 or 3 of you trying to work on a database. You're spending more time watching a spinner on the screen than you are doing work. Whereas with the cloud, you're using the latest tech, Amazon Web Services, and it's rapid if you've got tens and tens and tens of people working on the same file. So it's a game changer, the cloud.
Yeah, and Jade, that seems a little bit in contrast to what you're saying about a lot of older systems being used. Oh, welcome, Tim. Glad to see that Tim's been able to join our group as well. Jade, in particular, I was wondering about the sustainability agenda, and I think there's some concern about sustainability experts that the pandemic would place sustainability goals and the zero carbon agenda on the back foot a bit, and that an increase in single-use plastics, for example. Are you still optimistic there's enough focus on sustainability goals?
Not as much as there should be, not on broad sustainability. I think we've seen a huge increase in support for zero carbon. zero carbon policies, it's almost like we've got 5 years worth in the next 3 months. And anybody who's working in this area at the moment, we are tearing our hair out with government consultations on EPCs, on zero carbon policy. It's all coming at us at a rate of knots. So I think zero carbon, yes, has taken off. And I think one of the things that COVID has really shed a light on is normally we spend about 90% of our time indoors. Now we're spending around 100% of our time indoors, most of us. So this actually means that we're all spending our time in the indoor built environment. And sorry, we're in the indoor built environment. And what this means is that where most of our homes haven't been designed around health and well-being, and most of them aren't energy efficient, we know there's a huge job on our hands to retrofit the current housing stock, and actually a lot of us live in some of the worst housing stock in Europe, so it really desperately needs to change. So what this has done with COVID is shine a light that we need to address the indoor built environment for our health and well-being. And while zero carbon policies are coming at us thick and fast, and the government's doing a lot more in this area, if we just focus on carbon, we'll miss the bigger picture. And while we're retrofitting and dealing with zero carbon, we need to think about unintended consequences and the wider health and well-being aspects. So that is a much broader area, and there's very little actually on health and buildings in the policy landscape. So there's a real risk there that will be an issue. And for me, that's part of the sustainability piece, the people piece, is what we do with the built environment to improve well-being and productivity through our activity in office and everything else. And other areas like circular economy, pieces that we've known we need to do for some time, don't seem to be coming through. I do wonder as well with Brexit, most of the policies in the EU, I think about 80% of them are linked to energy and environmental issues. And that gave us this kind of long-term pipeline of policies coming through. I think with Brexit and COVID and all this uncertainty at the moment and delays, I wonder what will happen to the bigger picture stuff. And I'm not seeing it on the government radar.
Tim, that's a good link into another question that came out of the audience, which is a lot of people's minds when they think about the new technologies that we've talked about is new build and the opportunity to almost design a project to fit the technologies that exist. How much application are you seeing around existing stock, existing buildings and all the homes that we are currently in?
Not much is the short answer.
Okay.
Whether that was a I think that is a really unique point, is that too much focus is on new build.
Yeah.
And we know that I think the rate of churn of existing stock is more than the kind of 250 to 300,000 units a year for housing that we need to build. So effectively, if we build those, we're only replacing the kind of natural churn of existing stock in the housing sector. We're not actually building a net additional housing stock.
Yes.
So it's a massive problem, and I think the kind of there are solutions out there, but but they're not widely adopted.
And Jill, do you think? Sorry, Tim, go on.
No, go after you, sir. Yeah.
I was just going to ask Jill. Clearly, you have a number of different perspectives on the construction industry, and do you see a way to resolve exactly what Tim's talking about, that kind of drive towards greater building safety regulation, greater quality, but also this drive for modular and new technologies?
I think this is something that the Hub is obviously working with the sector to achieve, to transform construction using advanced manufacturing technologies, modern methods of construction, deliver safe buildings, and make sure that they have the quality in there. We have, like Jay said earlier, we have a lot of the technologies already. It's just joining it up and actually having the competency across the sectors to deliver it together. At the Hub, we're working on integrated building technologies as well, so an integrated roof system. As soon as you start to design and build buildings incorporating renewables, you start to build very low energy buildings. And again, how you design and model those is incredibly important. So through the value toolkit, we're looking at how you define that value for government. So if government's building, its schools, how it designs and builds those and saves them, but actually procures it in a way to deliver the best outcomes for all. So again, through our indices, through
Exactly.
the toolkit, you can model what's important and how it should be built and using those technologies, and obviously done in the sort of a safe way. And again, why the quality assurance tools take you through that process. So every way through the process, you are, you know, you're designing out defects.
Brilliant. And forgive me that we've had such a short time to talk to this panel. Please do continue the conversation with our panelists using the CLS 2020 hashtag on social media, and there'll also be networking opportunities afterwards. But we are bang on time to get Richard Waterhouse back to summarize and close the day 2 sessions. So thank you so much for your time to all of our panelists.